Coming up next on Insights on PBS Hawaii, how can Hawaii's special education services improve achievement for students with disabilities? Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff of Hawaii News Now. In the 1990s, a class action lawsuit forced Hawaii to overhaul its special education services, and by 2005, the state was one of only 9 in the country to meet federal special education requirements under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA. However, a decade later, these services have started to backslide. For the past 2 years, federal reviews have concluded the state needs improvement when it comes to IDEA compliance. Hawaii's Department of Education says it needs more qualified teachers who can create individualized lesson plans for the students who need them. But what else could help Hawaii students with disabilities succeed? Tonight, how can Hawaii's special education services improve achievement for students with disabilities? We want to hear from you during tonight's conversation. Call 973-1000 if you live on Oahu, or 800-238-4847 if you're calling from a neighbor island. You can also watch Insights streamed live at pbshawaii.org. Just click on the title of tonight's show, or find us on Twitter at PBS Hawaii. Now to our panel. Suzanne Mulcahy was recently appointed to the Department of Education's Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Curriculum Instruction and Student Support. That's quite a title. The office that oversees special education in the public schools. Prior to that, Ms. Mulcahy was the Complex Area Superintendent for the Kailua Kalaheo Complex. She has also been a special education teacher at Pearl City Elementary School and on the mainland. Martha Guinan is the chairwoman of Hawaii's Special Education Advisory Council, a volunteer group made up of parents of children with disabilities, educators, and others with expertise in special education and related issues. The advisory panel is a requirement under the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Act. Maylin Brown is the mother of 4 children ranging in age from 4 to 17. 3 of her children are in special education programs, and Ms. Brown is part of the Special Parent Information Network. And Nicholas Aiello spent 10 years as a behavioral health specialist for the Department of Education, providing counseling for special education students with emotional and behavioral needs. For the past 2 years, he has also provided in-home applied behavior analysis for individuals with autism. Mr. Aiello is currently a service coordinator for Kaiser Permanente's Quest Integration Program. And let's start off, if you don't mind, Suzanne Mulcahy from DOE, with a definition. What does it mean to be a child in special education?
Well, special education is a vast array of services that can be provided to a student that for assorted reasons is not able to access their education like their regular ed peers would be. So it could be something such as difficulty with speech articulation, all the way to somebody who is medically fragile and has a cognitive disability, and all points in between. So basically, a team comes together after testing, and they work together to determine if that child needs extra support, and if so, what that might be. It's always done with a team that includes the parents and school members, teachers that know the child.
Mm-hmm. Nicholas Aiello, you've been involved as a service provider. Mm-hmm. What kind of services do kids who are in special education need? What are the most common things we might see?
It could run from speech therapy to occupational therapy, to individualized supports in the classroom, modifications to seating, to lesson plan. And me personally, I was involved with the counseling. So I was the counselor provider for special education students who, in some way, their behaviors or emotions affected them accessing their education. So that could include individualized counseling, group counseling, in-class support, and helping the teachers with whatever accommodations might benefit that student to help them succeed.
Okay, and Maylin Brown, as a mom of several kids who've been through the system, tell me a little bit about your experience. I mean, what kind of challenges have you run into?
Basically, getting educators to understand my children's disabilities and needs, I think, is the greatest challenge. and actually understanding myself what a 504 is, an IEP, and what to expect with that. And just recently I discovered, I mean, I've been going through this, especially with my son, who's my oldest, for almost 7 years. He's needed assistance. There were signs when he was very, very young, and then he had cancer, and then that led to, you know, other things, a lot of other health issues and missing school and so forth. But if I would have known basically what I've known now, I feel I could have helped him in his earlier years, which would have shaped his life differently. But I know everything happens for a reason, so.
Well, what was the one biggest lesson that you think you'd taken away that you think parents should hear?
Definitely listen to your intuition and continue to research and get answers. You know, don't be assertive. You know, always question and find as much information as possible, because that's what led me to find out about the Spin Network program just a couple months ago. I just finally, after 7 years, and just got the support system that I need. My son, a couple years ago, did have a 504 plan created at a different school that he's attending, not attending now. But I just feel kind of like it was just processed because that was the law and we just did the paperwork. But I don't really feel, I'm sure everyone did the best that they could, but I just don't feel that he really got the support that he should have.
Martha Guinan, you are both a parent of a special needs child as well as a chair of this advocacy organization. Tell me a little bit about your personal experience and how it led you to this organization, and what does this organization do?
Well, my son is out of school now. He's 27 and he has Down syndrome. And so it's a lifelong, all-encompassing disability. And so, as Maylin was saying, we learn as we go, because when they're first born, of course, you don't really know a lot about it. And then you learn, and you learn from the teachers, and you learn from everyone around him. And he's the biggest teacher of all. Sure. Tells you what is going to be like.
Now, what does the group that you're involved with do now, and how active is it?
The Special Education Advisory Council is federally mandated, and it gets to give advice and advise the superintendent of the Department of Education and her people that help her in various capacities, like Suzanne, and we try to keep our ear to the ground, so we hear what's going on and we can pass that on of what's working, what's not, is there a problem, is there something working, and we try to pass all that on to people that can make a difference. We advocate in the legislature for various bills, and we also give advice to parents that call us.
Suzanne Mulcahy from DOE, how big an issue is this? Can you give me a sense of how many kids within the DOE system are under the rubrics of special education, and what kind of funding is it using?
Sure. We have about 11% of the students within the DOE have special education services, which is average in any population across the world. About 11% are in that special ed category. Interestingly, while we only have 11% of the student population eligible for special ed, about 23% of our funding goes to support the needs of those students.
Now is that, okay, so that's a quarter of the DOE's budget for instruction going to only 11% of the kids?
Well, it's not just instruction. It's special education teachers, educational assistants, one-to-one assistants, speech language therapists, OT, PT, behavioral health therapists, counseling. Lots and lots of different people come alongside the special ed student and their family to provide services.
Okay, Martha Guinan, tell me, those are striking numbers. 23% of the budget, almost 1 in 4 of the budget for 1 in 10 students. Why is that? How come it comes out that way?
Because the needs are greater. You know, if you have someone with a cognitive disability, they're not going to access the curriculum in the same way that other students. They can't listen to a lecture, for example, or watch something on the board. You know, you need to individualize their education so that they can succeed. You know, if you have somebody that's blind, you're going to need some adaptations. That's obvious. The physical ones are easier. But, you know, when you have behavioral problems or cognitive problems, then you need more supports, different supports.
Maylin, you talked about how long it took, and you've become kind of an expert through this. And this idea that you're learning as you go, do you think that's what most parents' experience is you're flailing around?
I'm definitely not an expert, but I appreciate that. I am definitely learning as I go, as I'm still going. And I do feel now, knowing when I got connected with the SPIN network and the Learning Disability Association of Hawaii, I felt like angels were singing.
But this is how long after your...
Almost 7 years.
So
I didn't even know they existed.
And that's lost time for your
Exactly.
son.
That's one of my hugest things that I wanted to come on the show was because that awareness needs to happen. Because I can't imagine I'm the only parent that doesn't know that there's resources and help and classes and workshops that are mostly free that can help you, that support you.
Nick Aiello, has this been your experience as you've worked with kids that oftentimes by the time you've got them, there have been several years have passed when they were struggling?
Well, I had primarily worked with mostly elementary students, so a lot of times it was when the student would get pulled into special education, so being a part of the eligibility process, and I think that there's a major point there that engaging parents and bringing them along in the process and informing them, it's an overwhelming situation for parents on many different levels, and so they come to the table with often no knowledge of special education law, of the rights, and so I think it's very, very important to make sure that they are a key member of that team, especially initially. I think at the elementary level, if they are coming into special education, you have to keep those parents informed throughout the entire process, not just once a year when the annual IEP is, and so because if you lose those parents that are at the elementary level, it sets them up for the rest of their school experience, and oftentimes when that relationship is damaged, it's really hard to repair that relationship. So that's key.
Absolutely.
Yes,
And
go ahead, Suzanne.
Maylin said that she wasn't an expert, and I understood what she meant. But Maylin is an expert about her children. There is nobody who knows Maylin's kids as well as she does. And Nick is absolutely right on. When a parent comes in and they're searching, things aren't going the way they anticipated they would, they're receiving what they feel is a little negative feedback about how their child is doing, that's when both sides, if you will, the department and the family, need to come together, and we need to listen. We need to both listen to each other, because as Nick said, if we don't come to listen and listen first to the parent that knows their child better than we do, then the rest of that school experience is usually not a positive one. When you're successful, it's when people have come together and gotten to know each other. They feel free to talk about things. They can be candid and address situations. When you come from the defensive stance, where you're afraid of what the other might do or say, the person who loses is not ever the adult. It's always the student. It has to be in the center of everything.
Let me throw this question out, and maybe Martha, you want to start on this one, is are the regular ed teachers recognizing, identifying kids as soon as they have suspicions, or is there a culture that says, don't bring this to the principal's attention, don't bring this to the parent's attention?
That's actually a question that Suzanne can answer better, but I do feel that many of the teachers do identify students and send them for testing. They have something called Child Find, which is very helpful. But not all of them do. A lot of teachers are a lot like us. They just say, oh, well, maybe I'm not teaching them right. maybe I can try, and they try and try and try until they can't do it anymore.
And maybe they get frustrated.
Yeah.
And Maylin, on your experience, does it track that way? I mean, did you have teachers telling you, oh, you should get your child tested?
No, I didn't, and that's another reason why I'm on the show. But my son, his situation, it was because of the cancer, which led him to have some a neuropsych test done, which showed a lot of his deficits, and then he had some behavioral issues and depression going on after that. So his psychologist is the one who's actually gave me this information about 504s and certain accommodations that he could benefit from.
So let me understand. So you're saying is that so your son was in the school, and struggling, but at no point did a teacher say, "Oh, here's how you access services."
No. They kept saying that he had behavioral issues, and he just wasn't motivated and very distracted, and it was mainly like it was my child's fault. He's just, for lack of a better term, not a good kid, but he is. He's very smart. He's very intelligent. I think a lot of these children are. I just think that they, on top of their disabilities, have different learning curves like all of us. And I don't think there's just one way to teach a child overall, but especially with disabilities and special needs.
Suzanne, what is the DOE's promise and commitment in terms of identifying kids as early as possible? I mean, and what's the role of the general education teacher in that?
Well, unless a student comes in at preschool and is identified and already in special ed, the person that would probably be the best one to refer would be the classroom teacher that sees how the student is doing, especially based on what they know they're going to learn and be able to do in that particular grade level, the behaviors, socially, emotional. But anyone can refer a student. A neighbor could, a family member could, and we're obligated to follow up on that. I think that it's important to identify students who have special ed needs, but I also think it's important that we don't over-identify. And shortly after Felix, we did have an issue. We hit about 15% of our population because people thought they didn't want to miss anybody who might need those services. The only thing worse than not identifying a student who really does need special education services would be to identify someone who doesn't need them, because in some ways it could hold them back. So I'm happy to see that we've kind of leveled out at about 10.5 to 11%. I am disappointed that we aren't doing better at identifying, based on what I've heard Maylin say. And I did want to clarify one thing, Daryl. What the federal government has said is that we do meet compliance. We're very good at being compliant and following the law. But the whole point of the compliance piece is so that kids can learn. And that's the part that we're not doing very well at. Our special ed kids are not learning commensurate with their peers. And so there's really a wide achievement gap, not just in Hawaii, just today. Education Week sent out an article about the fact that there's a large achievement gap between the regular ed students and the special ed students.
Let me try, Nick Aiello, since you've been sort of in the trenches on this, where do you think that gap is coming from, that gap between achievement? Because there's a statistic that we picked up where in 2004-2005, special education students scored 21% lower in math. In 2013-2014, that number is 48%. So there's really, it does seem like there's a backslide going on. Do you have any sense of why that's happening?
I do think there's, an increasing amount of, initiatives and burden that are coming, from the feds to, the teachers. And so it's, I think it's really key that, it's part of that special education is that the instruction is individualized. So capturing what those, students need, how they learn best, what are their strengths, because not every student is going to excel, straightforward at math and reading. And so, how to keep them engaged, so they want to learn. But at the same time, there also has to be a reality that, a lot of these gaps, there's a lot of, catching up to do. So, and it's by no fault of the student. And so I think that offering the teachers the support, seeing what that student is excelling at and capturing those strengths, and I think we can hopefully lessen that achievement gap.
Martha, do you think that part of the issue is, with the increasing pressure on teachers to have the whole class perform better, that sometimes the ability to focus on an individual is going away?
Yeah, I do. I think that's one of the problems right now is with things like the Common Core coming down. Teachers aren't sure. They're being trained, but it's, slow in coming in how they're going to adapt their classroom. So, and then they have to go down to the individual level for that student. And so it's difficult. And a lot of teachers I hear are getting very frustrated in how to do this. And they'd like to pass the buck on to somebody else, but they can't because it's their classroom and they need to be able to, provide the instruction for all the students.
Maylin Brown, when your children were, it sounds like it's what you're telling me, and this is based on a question from someone who asks, psychologically, how does being labeled as disruptive instead of special needs affect a child? Was that sort of what your situation was?
Yes. Yes, and I didn't even know that he was a special needs kid. I didn't know that these things were in that category because I didn't even have the education of all the amount of categories that lie under special needs. Mm-hmm. Usually from when I was younger, it was kids who were handicapped or had mental retardation, more physical disabilities versus cognitive and things like autism and everything.
When you hear someone from DOE say, and I'm just going to repeat what you said, that it's worse to label someone special ed or as bad, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's almost as bad to misdiagnose special ed than it is to miss the condition. How does that make you feel? Did you agree with that statement?
I'm sure it's definitely valid. I'm sure that experience is occurring, but I think there's a lot occurring. And I don't know. I feel that my kids were missed. And I think even with my child, my 7-year-old who's now in Montessori school, I feel that one of the teachers who used to comment a lot about thinking she had ADHD, I need to put her on medication, all kinds of things I was told, but never once mentioned it to a counselor at the school, hey, maybe we should have her evaluated or tested. And I think at that time that would have been a great proactive thing for her.
Martha Guinan, is there a sense also that there's a disincentive for principals, to get involved with a lot of special ed cases because it drags on, it's real difficult on their time, administrative time, and so on? Do you find that principals are sometimes not really proactive about helping a child?
Some principals, yes. I mean, it's a human thing. You don't want to put more on your plate than you can handle. You have a budget that you have to look at, all lots of different things. But they also know that they have to be able to make sure that all the students in their school are provided for.
Well, and if you're a principal, and I was a principal, and I was a special ed administrator in a very large school, we, meaning my colleagues and I, were always looking for ways to find support for students, because when there's a student who is not learning, who is not behaving, who is not performing the way you would expect them to do, then that means that the child is missing out on class time. They're spending a lot of time in the office, and kids don't belong in the office unless they're dropping off the attendance, and we do that online now. So it would not behoove a principal to ignore that. They would be looking for what is it that's going to help this student learn. So I think 256 schools. Does every school do the same excellent job as the other? No, unfortunately not. And we do have a lot of training to do. I think one of the biggest reasons we have an achievement gap is that people are depending too much on just special ed teachers and services to do the job, and we're not going to close the gap.
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit more.
because
So a teacher is, instead of working specifically with a child or in a classroom harder, putting that extra effort into that child there, they're saying, oh, the special ed teacher will take care of that?
Yeah, sometimes, and I taught special ed, so I received some of those students. When a child comes to school, they belong to everyone. They don't belong to the English language learner teacher or the SPED teacher. That child, regardless of disability, IEP or not, belongs to everyone. Everyone has to come and surround that child to provide what they need. And if they only go to a special ed class and they aren't with their peers, they aren't challenged, they aren't seeing grade level work, it's very hard to get them caught up. I remember having a student in my class when I was a special ed teacher and feeling like, wow, they're really ready to move back in with their general ed peers. I'm going to meet with the teacher and we're going to make this happen. And one of the first steps that I took was taking that child in to observe the language arts lesson. And the first thing that happened to me when I got there was I realized that in my special ed class, that student looked like they were ready. But when they got next to their peers, I had a lot of work to do. It was a great lesson to learn as a young teacher.
Let me ask Martha Guinan, this term, I've got several callers here asking about mainstreaming, and let me just start with your own experience with your son as a Down syndrome child. Was he, quote unquote, mainstreamed, or was he outside the system, outside the regular classroom all the time?
Well, for him, the way it worked is in preschool, that was fully self-contained.
And granted, this was a number of years ago.
Correct. Mm-hmm. But then once he got out of preschool, because there was no other students in preschool in DOE at that time, that was fully self-contained. But then once he got out of that, during elementary school, he was always in a regular classroom with supports. That changed the older he got and the more behaviors that got exhibited. Theoretically, the idea is to go for full inclusion, which is what he experienced in the beginning. But that should have continued on through high school, and it did not.
What full inclusion means? Is that mainstreaming or outside of?
It's basically like mainstreaming. It means getting the child in a regular classroom and giving him supports. There's lots of different kinds of supports that can be provided, and so it's really up to the student, his individual plan on how that's going to work for him. There's co-teaching, there's lots of different things.
Okay, and then Nick Aiello, let me ask you, with your experience with kids, how important is it to them, and how many are mainstreamed as opposed to outside?
Again, it comes down to the individual need, but I think that it's to the student if they're I think the overarching thing is that they're successful. So oftentimes if they're in a smaller setting, whether it be a resource room or pull out, if they're experiencing success, that's when they start to have better self-esteem and more confidence. And then the goal is always to put them into their their least restrictive environment. So if they're able to be successful for part of the day in the general education classroom, then that should be where they're placed. And so that with the end goal being that they're working towards as much time as possible in the general education classroom as they are successful. So it's not necessarily an issue of their they want to be in one class or the next always. It's sometimes when they're pulled out of their general education class and they start to feel, wow, I can do this, I can be successful, and they're getting ahead and they're making gains, that becomes the more important issue to them.
Suzanne, how many or how large a proportion of the special ed population is quote unquote mainstreamed? How many are not?
I don't have that statistic. I can just talk about what I've seen in my visits to schools as a complex area superintendent and now as an assistant superintendent. And what I see is that there is some measure of mainstreaming regardless of whether or not the student is in fully self-contained or something a little bit less at some point in the day. So-
I'm a little lost about what fully self-contained
So
means.
fully self-contained means a student would go to one classroom and stay in that classroom all day. They wouldn't go out to other classrooms.
And that's a regular education classroom.
It's a special ed.
Okay.
Well, a regular ed could be considered fully self-contained too, because kids are going to that room with just a teacher. But in the special ed realm, fully self-contained would be that the student is just in that special ed class without opportunity to go out. And that's very rare nowadays. At some point, they're going out. If it isn't for English language arts or mathematics, science, or social studies, it might be for music or art or physical education, some kind of extracurricular activity. And the special ed teacher should always be working with the regular ed teacher to see at what point can we start bringing the student back into the regular ed class. I don't know how it was when you went to school, but something fabulous that for some reason educators stopped doing for a while and now it's in vogue again was small group instruction. I took a year long learning how to split up a class and do small group instruction. You can do that quite easily with special ed students in your classroom, provided you have the background and training and the support of other personnel, so that everyone is in that room hearing enriched vocabulary and academic ideas and thoughts and discussion. But you're not so overwhelmed that it's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Right?
If you excuse me for a moment, I'm going to address the audience. Just quickly, tonight we're talking about special education in Hawaii. Please call, email, or tweet your questions and comments. Call 973-1000 if you're calling from Oahu, and 800-238-4847 if you're calling from a neighbor island. Martha Guinan, you wanted to...
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I do have that statistic in our the CX last annual report. We look at the DOE's data, their own data, and it showed that Hawaii students received support in general education classrooms 36% compared to the national average of 62%. So we're not doing very well in Hawaii.
Okay, let me explain that statistic a little bit more fully. So 36% are what?
Are being included with supports. So supports are being
included.
Yes, supports are being provided.
So that's the mainstream group.
Yeah, correct. And 62% nationally.
Suzanne,
So other
that's kind of-
states
yeah.
are doing a better job of including special ed kids in the regular ed classrooms than we are in Hawaii.
Why is that?
And I think it's due in part to the fact that when we had a shortage of teachers, we brought in a lot of folks on emergency hire contracts. They had not been trained teachers. They had degrees and they were going to school to become, but they never did work alongside a master teacher to learn the pedagogy, which is the art and science of teaching, the strategies that you would use. Probably the last time they were in a classroom was when they themselves were in school. And so many states, Hawaii included, brought in people who were not trained teachers. And I think that sometimes that means that people develop bad habits that are then hard to break later.
Yeah.
We have to have the colleges and universities help to infuse the training in their preparation programs before they get into the DOE, not just one class on everything you ever wanted to know about special ed, but all the strategies that would support them in working with those students.
Okay, Martha.
The other problem being that many teachers are trained in various disciplines, whether it be special ed or, a mild, moderate, severe, but they're not being placed that way. And for lots of different reasons. Some of them decide they don't like that, and others just got mishired, and they haven't managed to get out of that situation. So that's another big problem that we need to fix here in Hawaii.
Mei Lin, yeah, you wanted to jump in on this?
Absolutely, because this is, I see from my experience with my children and speaking with teachers and in these meetings that I'm going into, is not only that, now I've learned this information, thank you, that short staff or teachers are going into classrooms not fully trained. So just imagine that already is an issue. But then now they're dealing with children who have disabilities that are mainstreamed. They don't even understand the disabilities and the symptoms and the special type of education that child needs. So a lot of children, I feel, are getting lost in the classrooms because the teachers are not fully educated and don't even know how to implement what they need in their IE.
So as a
plans,
parent,
IEP plans.
would you advocate for that? Would you advocate that the teachers that are dealing with your children have a particular expertise there as opposed to being a general ed teacher who has some training? Is that how you feel about it?
I do, and I think it's something out of the box. I think it's something new. I know that there's a lot of overwhelm already with teachers with paperwork and making sure you're compliant and assessments. I know I'm getting into a lot of things, but this still affects their teaching abilities, and the energy that they have for children, because special needs children, as we know, I know as a parent, I don't know as a teacher, I can imagine how challenging it is on all levels.
Nick, what's been your observation with the kids? I mean, I know that you're not seeing them so much inside the classroom, right?
Yeah, so I mean, it would be pull out, so it would be either, it could be individual counseling, group counseling. I could see them in the classroom if they were acting out to say, avoid doing their classwork, then I might just sit with them in the classroom to eliminate that issue.
So getting back to this statistic that Martha cited, what do you think is going on that would be that big gap between us and the mainland?
Well, I think things are moving in the right direction as far as I think there's a lot more co-teaching happening in Hawaii schools. So, a special education teacher and a general education teacher working alongside each other in the same classroom. Which, of course, increases the amount of time that the special education students are in the general education classroom. And I do think that, as Suzanne's point about, teachers in training, I think that as that is kind of the general trend to this co-teaching model, I think that we have to train, general education teachers that, that special education is a huge part of, their role, regardless if they're general education or not. And so I think that informing them of, whether it's how to manage behavior better or more information about special education law and that side of it, I think it shouldn't just be relegated to special education teachers to learn those fundamentals.
But Suzanne, back to that, the DOE's position on this, I understand from another, there's a tremendous shortage of special education teachers in the Department of Education, isn't there? And then what are you doing to address that? How big a shortage is it, and how are you addressing it?
Well, we just reported to the Board of Education a couple weeks ago about the shortage, and the Office of Human Resources recruits every year, and there are specific colleges and universities on the mainland that we have found have sent excellent special ed teachers, some of whom have stayed longer than a year or two, and 4 or 5 years, and have become leaders in our department. And so they are focusing on those colleges and universities, going to seek after folks who would be interested in coming and joining the department to work with our kids and young people. In addition to that, we do work with University of Hawaii and Chaminade, 2 universities here on this island. I am partnering with them to try to help bring something to our regular ed teachers that would build their capacity, especially the brand new teachers who may not have ever had special ed students in their classroom.
How big is the shortage, though, of specifically special ed teachers at this point?
Martha, is it about 280 or short about 280 special ed?
280 short.
So if you figure we have 256 schools, kindergarten
right.
through high school. So that means that there might be somebody who is not SPED certified, but they're willing to teach, even though they're not yet licensed. We do have dual certification, so that means when University of Hawaii sends us a student, they might have both regular ed and special ed licenses, and quite often they come in with the special ed license. But as board member Brian DeLima pointed out last week at the board meeting, teaching is very complicated, and teaching special ed students is even more complicated.
What's the premium? I mean, how can you get more? I mean, are you able to offer significant more pay or benefits or better works?
It's very interesting you should mention that. When I was in California, I made $5,000 more per year because I taught special ed. Because in that state, special ed teachers are considered specialists. You require a master's degree, and in some areas, a master's degree plus 3 additional classes. And so you get paid more. that is definitely something that people have been
you
talking
can't pay them
about.
more here?
In Hawaii, no.
Why not?
It's a part of the contract, so it is definitely something that we should probably discuss.
How do you feel hearing that as a parent, that there's a tremendous shortage and you've got all these kids in the school system?
Well, I believe it because I don't think my children have ever been to a special education teacher. I don't even recall meeting one. I just student service coordinator who works with special education. That's pretty much my experience. But yeah, I mean, it's disheartening and very concerning. I mean, I really think there's a lot of pressure on the general education teachers right now with the children who have special needs and special education. So I definitely think that that's necessary.
Martha Guinan, you've advocated at the legislature for improvements to special education. What kind of, and I imagine with the union and so on, what kind of blowback do you get when you go in there and say, you guys aren't doing a very good job with special eds?
Well, I mean, we don't say it just like that, for one thing.
Maybe you should.
I don't know, but we try to pick our issues, and currently right now we're working on restraints and seclusion, which is a way of dealing with people with behavioral problems. Some students have been restrained because they feel, the teacher or whoever feels like they're a harm to themselves, and that needs to change.
How often does that happen?
Too often. Once is too often. It really is. I mean, quite honestly, that was the start of the Felix decree. Was a
She was put in a closet, I think,
yes,
Jennifer Felix. Right?
Student was put in a closet, which is a restraint. And there are other ways to deal with behavioral problems.
But let me ask, though, I mean, in terms of how alarming to you is this shortage of special ed teachers?
It's very alarming. And there's lots of problems. I mean, Suzanne talked about one, that we don't pay our special they have to get all this extra training, and they're not being paid extra. They're also not getting supports that they need. They need additional professional development and time to do that professional development. But then, of course, then we're pulling them out of the classroom. And so the students aren't getting the benefit of their expertise and knowledge because they need more, you know? You know,
I'm getting a lot of questions now. Suzanne, first, would you like to respond at all to what the other panelists have said about this shortage?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, you know, I actually wrote an article in the newspaper to bring up the idea. I didn't wait for somebody to mention it to me. As a new assistant superintendent, it bothered me, especially since I have family members who are special needs students. I taught special ed. I was an administrator for special ed and led a complex area. And so I illuminated it because I can't do it by myself. We need everyone coming together. Mm-hmm. And today we have talked about some of the challenges and some of the things that aren't going well. But I would be remiss if I didn't say there are a lot of excellent special ed teachers.
Actually, let me.
Who are doing a great job, and we do graduate kids college and career ready who are special needs, and some of them even go to college and stay in and graduate.
And I've gotten a number of calls now from people who are kind of going there with that.
Great.
Warren in Honolulu has a severely handicapped daughter. She was in public school, special ed. He was very happy with her handling of his daughter. She is now in a sheltered workshop and does not want her disturbed or mainstreamed. Martha, translate that for me. Sheltered workshop.
Sheltered workshop is a place that a student is, I mean, I don't know how old this person is, but the student is placed there, and they they do handicrafts, they create things. Here in Hawaii, Lanakila is a sheltered workshop, and they make things that are sold, and that's their job.
Oh, I see. So it's not even at school at all, possibly, depending on her age.
Possibly, depends.
And then Nick Aiello question was, how effective are skill trainers, et cetera, and do we have enough? First off, tell me, you know, how it feels to be effective. And do you feel that you've helped a lot of kids, and are there enough of you?
As far as if I have felt effective, I think I've felt the most effective when I've had the the positive relationship with the families and with the school faculty. I think that makes for the strongest team is one that you all have the same mission, and that is the focus is on the student and their well-being and their achievement, and you are a united front. So if that relationship is intact, it bodes well for the for the effectiveness of my role and for the team, I think. And as far as for skills trainers, I know that the DOE has taken, they're moving away from having contracted skills trainers, so they're in-house as DOE employees, and they're coming in and by and large they're trained, and of course there's always room for improvement. And
By and large, they're trained. I think that if they're being called skilled trainers, they would have been trained.
and of course they're trained before they come into the DOE, but
Okay.
I'm saying as far as if they're effective, I mean the ones that I've worked with have been effective and working with that student based on their needs and being informed of if they have a behavior support plan and what the interventions that work best with that student are. I mean, there's a whole gamut of needs that a student might need a skills trainer for. And so, and even now they're working, with having an autism-specific, training component. So there's skills trainers that are specific with training in autism. So, that those kids can get the, specific interventions that they need.
Okay, let me bring up another positive call. Are any of the panelists familiar with the Best Buddies Inclusion Friendship Program? We're in 18 schools here.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about it.
Best Buddies is an organization, well, here in Hawaii they do it with high school, but across the nation they also do college level. And they create friendships between typically developing students and our special needs students. And that provides them with friendships and people that will stand up for them if they get bullied, and also enlightens the typical population on what a person with a disability can do.
Malin, did you ever come across anything like that in your?
Not yet.
Sounds
no.
pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And why wouldn't we do that? Because, society is made up of all different kinds of people, some special needs, some not, some who speak English as their first language, some who are learning it, all different people. And every school is like that as well. It's just a smaller group of people. Chances are these students who now have special needs are going to live longer than their parents. And why wouldn't we as the community get to know those kids and how to take care of them when we're in elementary and middle and high? The reality is some of my students who are now in their 40s are living a high quality of life, very meaningful, because of their classmates who have surrounded them and are providing the support they need. And I think that's one of the strengths that we have in Hawaii when I see extracurricular activities and the inclusion of the special ed kids. We're practicing for what it's going to be like when they're older.
Well, that's an important point, because I've heard of situations, I'm sure Martha would be aware of this, where kids don't want to be labeled special ed, they don't want to be seen as special ed, and that's part of a stigma. Are we getting anywhere towards ending that stigma?
Well, yeah, we are. We're making moves. I mean, when I was growing up, I remember there might have been one boy with a wheelchair, but there's more and more people with disabilities out there, and the more that are out there and you see them and you interact with them, you're going to know that they're people too.
And also that runs the television show Glee, right? That featured a young man in a wheelchair.
And
Malin,
a girl with Down syndrome.
Oh, that's right, exactly. Malin, did your kids, from the kids' point of view, what's this like, do you think? I mean, you've got your oldest are probably able to explain to you what it was like. Do they really resist getting help because they can be held up as different?
Well, I do want to talk about my daughter, who just recently, since her brain injury, we've discovered some other things that she needed support in. But her particularly, it's been frustrating for peers and educators to understand what traumatic brain injury is. It's like a silent disability. She's very beautiful, very outgoing, she's very intelligent, but she has, you know, deficits, cognitive deficits that are pretty strong and challenging for her. So partially, I mean, nobody wants to be labeled, I think, only in the sense, can I get the support that I need through this label? And I think that's where labeling becomes important.
You know, I got another call, Suzanne, that I'd like you to respond to. This is from a high school teacher with special ed training. Says, in DOE, how is she to provide special ed teaching in a class of 38 with 12 special education children?
Great question.
You know, are we just understaffed and underfunded in DOE? I mean, or, you know, how are we going to fix something like that?
Well, there is a way. First of all, it's kind of funny because somebody thinks that those kids in that classroom are in a regular ed setting. But if a third of those kids are special ed, I'm not sure it's a regular ed setting anymore. And so what I would want to know is, does this teacher have a co-teacher with them? Somebody that is helping with strategies and interventions while the expert in the content is up there teaching.
So there should be two teachers in that classroom.
Do they have educational assistants who are there supporting? Do they have planning time so that the special ed teacher who knows those kids well can give the regular ed teacher a heads up?
Okay, so let me just, sorry to interrupt you, but this scenario, what should be going on in that classroom, and how close are you in the department to doing what you should in a situation like that, having the staff available and so on?
That's hard to say, Daryl, in my new position, because I'm not at the 256 schools. What I would say is this: I think that our principals need to have a little bit more training in special education. It's not that they haven't had it, there are varying degrees of it, but you have to continue that cycle. You have to keep bringing it to the forefront. You have to keep them abreast with what's new. We have to do the same thing with our teachers, whether they're regular ed or special ed. And we really have to put the needs of the students in the middle and think about how many kids are in a classroom and how many of them are sped. And is there a co-teacher? Is there extra support? Are there other people there who can come alongside? And so from my vantage point, it means working together as a leadership team to make sure that our principals understand how to create an excellent special ed program at their school. And I think that's one of my biggest disappointments right now, sitting next to Maylin, who I've just met, is that when I hear Maylin describe what she went through, my heart breaks. Because I've been in schools where I saw the opposite. And I wonder, where would her kids be now? Where would she be? How would she be feeling if she had had that experience? And we have to make it equal. We have to make it so that regardless of what school you go on, what island, who you have as a teacher, it's going to be the same for everybody, and it's going to be excellent. And it's a tall order.
It is. And Martha Guinan, how close do you think, I mean, in my other role, you know, I see lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit brought by parents against DOE fighting for services. And we talked about the backsliding a little bit at the beginning of the show. Is there a chance that there's going to be another class action? We may again see the federal government stepping into Hawaii's special education system?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. There's actually a problem with due process right now. There's fewer cases, which it's a positive thing that fewer cases have been brought recently in the last few years. But we at SEAC are concerned that possibly that reason for that is there are fewer and fewer lawyers willing to take on the cases because there was been a problem with payment of lawyers and other reasons that doesn't make them want to take it on. Some of them are retiring.
Are you saying that the federal government should get back involved, the federal courts should get back involved?
Here in Hawaii, I can't speak nationally right now.
I'm talking about Hawaii. Yeah.
Right. Here in Hawaii, I do think that the due process system here needs to be looked at. We don't use mediation.
Due process is the system by which a parent can appeal for better services,
yes.
Right?
Yes. You know, there is a system of that you can use ending up in due process. One of the first things is mediation, and that mediation is not well used here.
Let me give Suzanne a chance. We've only got a couple more minutes to go, and a lot of these questions have ultimately been pointed back at you. I mean, is there a problem with that? Are we broken in that respect?
With regard to due process?
With regard to how parents can fight for services?
Well, I think the first step is parents have to go to their teacher or principal, and the principal and teacher need to listen. And if there's a problem, then the parent needs to go and advocate for their child, or we won't know. And then if they can't solve it there, then they can go through mediation, due process, a complaint.
Okay, I
but
have to
both
ask you.
people have to.
We're going to come back for our
Okay.
internet section after this, but right now we've got to say goodbye. Thank you all very much. On next week's show, as the state and counties look for solutions to the homeless crisis in Hawaii, some people are finding creative ways to shelter the homeless and provide them with new opportunities. How are innovators finding ways to lift people out of homelessness in Hawaii? That's next week on Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Ahui ho.